I tripped on my back porch step 3 months ago, caught myself, stood there shaking, knee bleeding, and the first thought that came, not relief, not pain, was a calculation. How long before someone noticed I was down? I'm 79 years old. I have a paid-off house, a clean filing cabinet, a retirement account in better shape than most. And the answer was 48 hours. That's what I built. 50 years of not needing anyone. And that's exactly what I got. It's Sunday afternoon and I haven't spoken a word out loud in 4 days. Not to a neighbor, not on the phone, not even to myself, which I know some people do, talk to themselves in empty houses. But I never picked up that habit. And now the silence is so complete it has a texture to it, like something you could press your hand against. I noticed it the way you notice a leak you've been ignoring. Not suddenly, but the moment you finally stop moving long enough to look. I was sitting in the kitchen with a cup of coffee that had gone cold, watching the light change on the backyard, and I thought, when was the last time I heard my own voice? And I counted back. Friday I was at the hardware store, but I just pointed at what I needed. Thursday was the last actual exchange. 12 words with the pharmacist, maybe 15. And before that, nothing. 4 days. 79 years old. And 4 days without a single word out loud. That's what I want to tell you about. Not the dramatic version, not some crisis, not a hospital, not a breakdown. Just this. The ordinary arithmetic of a life where connection got quietly, steadily subtracted, and you didn't notice the total until you were already here. I want to be precise about what my life looks like from the outside because the outside is misleading. The house is a 3-bedroom colonial on Sycamore Park Drive in Columbus. Bought in 1987, paid off in 2009, maintained carefully because I was an engineer for 31 years and I cannot tolerate a thing that isn't functioning as it should. The gutters are clean. The furnace gets serviced every October. The lawn is cut on Saturdays by a service I pay $40 a week because my knees aren't reliable anymore, and I know better than to argue with my knees. Inside, clean, organized. A kitchen where everything has a place. A living room with a couch that still looks almost new because no one has sat on it regularly in years. A dining table that seats 6. I eat at the kitchen counter. There's a filing cabinet in the 2nd bedroom, the one that was my son's, that contains every financial document I might ever need, sorted by year and category, going back to 1991. There are no pictures on the wall in that room. I kept meaning to do something with it and never did. And now it's been 16 years, and the walls are still bare, and the filing cabinet is there. And sometimes I open the door and just look at it and close it again. I have a retirement account that is in better shape than most people my age. I have supplemental insurance. I have a will that is current and a list of instructions for what should happen afterward, because I was an engineer, and engineers document things, and also because I am aware, in a way I wasn't at 50 or 60, that the afterward is not entirely theoretical anymore. From the outside, a man who handled things well. From the inside, a man sitting in a kitchen on a Sunday in October 2023 with cold coffee, doing the math on how long it's been since anyone in the world knew what day it was for him. I was married for 22 years. Carol. We met in 1975 at a project review meeting. She was a city planner. I was the engineer on the drainage infrastructure, and she disagreed with my slope calculations in front of 12 people and turned out to be right. I respected that immediately. I think I loved her because of it for a long time. We had 2 kids, Daniel and Susan. There were years, the middle years, the school years, the years when the house had a noise to it that were genuinely good. I was not an absent father, not in the physical sense. I was there. I coached Daniel's Little League for 2 seasons. I drove Susan to piano lessons every Thursday for 6 years. I was present. What I was not, and this is the thing I didn't understand until it was already too late to change, was available. There's a difference. Present means your body is in the room. Available means that if someone needed to reach you, really reach you, the door was open. My door was never exactly closed. It was just heavy, hard to push, not worth the effort if you didn't have something concrete to say. Carol pushed it for years. She was not a woman who gave up easily. I know that now in a way I didn't fully appreciate then. She asked for things, not big things, not unreasonable things, just the regular maintenance that a marriage requires. Talk to me. Be here. Let me know what's happening inside you. And I would try, briefly, and then retreat back behind the practicalities, because practicalities were something I knew how to manage and feelings were something I mostly found inefficient. She left in 2003, said she was lonelier inside the marriage than she would be outside it. I thought that was unfair at the time. I've had 21 years to think about it, and I no longer think it was unfair. The seed was smaller than the divorce. The seed was earlier, much earlier. Sometime in the late 1980s, I can't pin the exact year. Daniel was maybe 8 or 9. He came into my home office on a Saturday morning while I was going over project specs, and he stood in the doorway for a moment. And then he said, "Dad, do you want to throw the ball around?" I said, "Give me an hour." He said, "Okay." He went downstairs. I finished what I was doing, which took closer to 2 hours. And when I came downstairs, he was watching television, and the moment had passed, and neither of us mentioned it. That was not a dramatic failure. That was not abuse or neglect. That was a Saturday morning in the late 1980s when a man chose to finish his work instead of throwing a ball with his son. It happens in every family. It probably happened in yours. But I chose it again the next Saturday, and the one after that. Not always with Daniel. Sometimes it was Susan, sometimes it was Carol. But the pattern was the same. There was always something that needed finishing first, and by the time I finished it, the person who had been waiting had stopped waiting. I told myself I was providing. I told myself that the financial stability, the paid-off house, the full retirement account, that was a form of love. And it was. I'm not saying it wasn't. I'm saying it was not the only form of love that was needed, and it was the only one I knew how to give. Ray Kowalski was my closest colleague for 30 years, 20 at the firm, 10 more just as friends, the way men are friends when they don't have the vocabulary for what they actually mean to each other. He went through his own divorce around the same time as mine, maybe a year later. And what Ray did, which I watched, was something that I now recognize as fear and then called disapproval, was fall apart in front of people. He went to a therapist. He told his kids he was struggling. He called me once, late on a weeknight, just to talk. Nothing specific, just to hear a voice. And I remember being on the phone with him thinking, what does he want me to do with this? I listened. I said the right things. I got off the call as efficiently as I could. Ray asked for help when he needed it. That's the whole difference. A man I thought was handling things badly, who turned out to be building something while I was protecting something. I didn't see it that way then. After Carol left, I did what I knew how to do. I organized. I reorganized the house, converted her closet into a proper storage space, established routines that worked for one person: coffee at 6:30, out the door by 7:40, dinner at 6, in bed by 10:30. I was still working then, still running projects, still the person in the room whose opinion about load-bearing calculations was the one that ended the conversation. At work, I was still legible, still someone with a function. The weekends were when I first understood what I had actually agreed to by being the kind of man I was. The weekends were enormous. Not in a dramatic way. No sitting in dark rooms, no visible suffering. Just an expanse of unstructured time that I had no particular machinery for filling. Because for 22 years, the filling had been done by proximity to other people. Carol's plans, the kids' schedules, the ambient noise of a house that was used by more than one person. Without it, I discovered that I had not built anything to fall back on. No hobby that required other people. No friendships that had been maintained past the point of convenience. What I had built, very efficiently, was a life that could be operated by one person. I told myself this was self-sufficiency. I was a man who didn't need to be managed, who wasn't a burden. I made that sound like a virtue for so long that I almost believed it wasn't also a defense. The voicemail from Daniel arrived in March 2019. He left it on a Sunday afternoon. I saw it come in. Didn't answer because I was in the middle of something. And by the time I played it back, it had been a few hours. His voice was different than I expected. Not urgent, not angry. Just reaching for something. He said he'd been thinking about whether we could spend more time together. That he felt like he didn't really know me. That he was aware time was moving and he didn't want to keep waiting for some unspecified later. I listened to that voicemail 3 times, and then I didn't call back. Not that day, not that week. I kept the voicemail. I still have it, still on my phone, 5 years later, still saved in a folder I don't open. And I kept meaning to call when I had something real to say, when I'd figured out how to respond to it properly, when I wasn't going to fumble it. The right moment kept not arriving. Weeks became months. By the time enough time had passed that calling back required an explanation I didn't know how to give, I had simply not called. Daniel calls on Christmas, sometimes his birthday. The conversations run about 12 minutes on average. They are not cold exactly. They're just thin. The kind of calls between two people who have run out of shared material and are maintaining the form of a relationship without quite having the substance of one. It is the most expensive thing I have ever failed to return. I let every friendship I had expire through simple inattention, not through fights, not through betrayal, through the specific kind of neglect that looks from the inside like independence and from the outside like indifference. Men from the firm I'd worked alongside for 2 decades, a neighbor named Phil who used to stop by on weekends until he stopped stopping by. And I noticed the absence, but didn't reach back, because reaching requires initiating, and initiating felt like asking, and asking felt like admitting. Admitting what? I couldn't have told you then. I can tell you now, admitting that I needed something. That company was not optional. That the way I had structured my life, functional, self-contained, frictionless, was also and entirely empty. I told myself the friendships faded because people get busy, because life moves on, because that's just what happens when you're in your 60s and everyone is dealing with their own things. I told myself I preferred my own company. I told myself that people who needed a lot of social contact were people who couldn't sit comfortably with themselves. I had a whole architecture of justifications built around the specific shape of my isolation, and I lived inside it like it was a house I had chosen rather than one I had drifted into without noticing the door had closed behind me. I remember the exact sound of Phil's truck pulling into his driveway from the kitchen window in 2015 or 2016. I was doing dishes. I saw him get out with groceries, and I thought about going to the door. I didn't. The engine sound of his truck pulling away an hour later is a sound I still hear sometimes. I don't know why it stayed. It's just the sound of a thing I could have done and didn't. The cost of all of this is not what I imagined it would be when I imagined getting older. I thought the cost of aging would be physical. The knees, which I knew were coming. The back. The medications that get added slowly, one at a time, like items appearing on a bill you can't dispute. I prepared for all of that. I have a good doctor. I follow instructions. My health, for a 79-year-old man who did not always treat his body with great kindness, is adequate. What I did not prepare for was the specific quality of invisibility. When you are old and alone, you become, to the world in general, a presence that does not require acknowledgement. I go to the grocery store and the checkout person does not look up. I sit in the waiting room at the doctor's office and people look past me the way they look past furniture. I go to the hardware store where I have been going for 30 years, and there are young people behind the counter now who treat me with efficient courtesy, which is the most polite possible form of indifference. I understand this. I was that young person once, moving through the world at speed, not particularly registering the older people in the waiting rooms and checkout lines. It's not malice. It's just that when you are moving forward, you don't look at what is standing still. I am standing still now, and I am realizing what it means not to be seen. The moment I want to tell you about, the one I keep coming back to, happened on a Wednesday evening sometime last winter. I was heating soup, one can, one pot, the kind of meal that requires nothing and produces nothing and keeps a body running the way putting gas in a car keeps it running. Functional, without pleasure. The television was on in the other room because I've gotten into the habit of keeping it on, not to watch, just for the noise of voices, because the silence of this house in the evening is a specific kind of silence that I have not made peace with. I stirred the soup. The spoon hit the side of the pot, a small sound, the only sound I was making. And I looked at the kitchen, and the kitchen looked back at me, and I had the thought, not panicked, just clear, the way things are clear when they've been true for a long time. This is not temporary. This is not a phase. This is what you built. 3 bedrooms, 1 person, soup for 1, a couch nobody sits on, a voicemail I still haven't returned. This is what you build when you spend 50 years perfecting the skill of not needing anyone. Ray, the last time I saw him, was at a retirement party for someone from the old firm, maybe 4 years ago. He was smaller than I remembered. He'd had some health issues. His color wasn't good. He was sitting at a table with his daughter and her husband and 2 grandkids who were climbing on him, and he was laughing in a way that looked real. His apartment, he told me, is 700 square feet in a building full of other people his age. He'd sold his house after the divorce, couldn't afford to keep it, didn't want to rattle around in it. I remember at the time feeling that he'd lost, that the smaller space, the lesser circumstances, amounted to a kind of defeat. I have 3 bedrooms, the filing cabinet, the clean gutters, the retirement account. And on a Tuesday afternoon, if you went to Ray's apartment, there would be someone there. I don't have a word for what I feel about that, but it's not superiority. I want to tell you what this actually feels like. Not the version that sounds bearable, the real version. It feels like living in a parenthesis, like the main text of the world is happening somewhere else, and you are in the bracketed pause at the edge of it, waiting for something that no longer has a schedule. Days have a sameness that is different from peace. Peace is the absence of disturbance. This is the absence of variation. Each day functionally identical to the last. The hours passing without any particular reason for them to be this hour rather than any other. Time moving not quickly or slowly, but just steadily, indifferently, with no one counting it alongside you. I sleep in the same bedroom I slept in for 30 years of marriage. The bed is a king. I sleep on one side. The other side has pillows on it that I have not moved in years. Not because I think someone is coming, but because moving them would make a decision about something I am not ready to make a decision about. I have a neighbor named Helen, 70s, widowed, 2 houses down, who waves when we're both outside. We've had full conversations maybe a dozen times in 6 years. She brought me soup last winter when I had bronchitis. I told her she didn't need to do that. She said she knew she didn't need to. That's the closest thing I have to community. I don't say this for sympathy. I say it because I think people hear aging alone and imagine a specific kind of dramatic suffering, crying in the dark, visible despair. And the reality is more quiet and more total than that. It's not a crisis. It's a climate. 3 months ago, I tripped on my back porch step. The step has a slight unevenness I've known about for 2 years and kept meaning to fix. And I caught my foot on it coming out with the recycling and went down on one knee, hard, against the concrete. I caught myself on the railing, both hands just barely. And I stood there for a moment, heart going, knee throbbing. The recycling bin tipped over beside me. And the first thing I thought, not relief, not thank God, not anything about the fall itself, was the calculation. How long before someone noticed? Helen might see in a day or two that my car hadn't moved. Daniel gets notified if I don't respond to a check-in within 48 hours. I set that up myself, deliberately, because I am an engineer and I plan for failure modes. So probably 48 hours, maybe 72. I stood on the back porch for a long time after I'd steadied myself. The recycling was on the ground. My knee would bruise, but wasn't serious. Everything was fine. The calculation was the part that wasn't fine. That I had gotten so used to the arithmetic of being unnoticed that it was my first reflex. Not I could have been hurt, but how long until someone checked. That's what this life has trained me to think. You're listening to this, and maybe you're 35, maybe 45. Maybe you're already somewhere in the territory I'm describing, and you recognize the specific color of it. I'm not going to tell you what I wish I'd done differently, because that list is long and useless, and I've already taken it out and looked at it enough times. What I'm going to tell you is what I see from here, from 79, looking at the choices that people your age make every day without knowing what they're actually choosing. When you decide it's not worth the effort to maintain a friendship, when you let it lapse because you're busy, because it requires energy you'd rather spend elsewhere, you're not just losing that friendship. You're practicing the skill of not reaching. And like any skill, the more you practice it, the better you get. And one day you will be very, very good at it. And the life you're living will be the result. When you choose not to call back, when you let the uncomfortable conversation wait until later, when you tell yourself you need more to give before you can show up. I understand that reasoning. I used it for 40 years. It sounds like self-awareness and it functions like a wall. The Tuesday afternoon test. That's what I call it now, in my own head. On a Tuesday afternoon, not a holiday, not a birthday, not an occasion, would someone come? Not because they had to, not out of obligation, just because you are part of the texture of their life and they wanted to be near you. Do you pass that test? Right now? Today? Because I didn't build for it. I built for everything else and I forgot to build for that. And now I live in the result. Call the person you've been meaning to call. Not when you have something worth saying. Now, today. The fact that you thought of them is the thing worth saying. Tell me in the comments, is there someone in your life you've let the silence go on too long with? Because I know exactly what that silence turns into. And I'm telling you, from inside it, it is not worth what you think you're protecting.